It is such a privilege and a pleasure to be here in Iowa with so many patriots, so many people that are standing up for the faith. Now, George Santayana once said, if we do not learn from history, you're bound to repeat it. I was born in Cuba, and I found myself as a young teenager involved in a revolution. We had a very strong, oppressive military dictatorship in Cuba. And so the revolution started in the high schools and the universities. And among these, a young charismatic leader rose up, talking about hope and change. His name was Fidel Castro. And we all followed him. We thought he was going to be our liberator. Well, to make a long story short, as a result of my being involved in the revolution, I ended up being in prison and tortured. But God had other plans, even though some of my friends that had suffered the same fate had been found dead on the streets afterwards. By the grace of God, I was able to leave the country. Came to this country, the greatest country on the face of the earth, on a student visa. And went to the university, got a job as a dishwasher, worked full-time, went to school full-time. And then, about a year and a half after I was here, in 1959, Castro took off. So I went back to Cuba for about a month, and I got the shock of my life. That same man that had been talking about hope and change now was talking about how the rich were evil, how they oppressed the poor, and about the need to redistribute the wealth. Well, they began persecuting pastors, putting pastors in prison. They began attacking the press, curtailing freedom of the press, began shutting down newspapers, shutting down TV stations, and began confiscating property. Anyone who was a professional, anyone who owned a small business was an enemy of the revolution. And so they began confiscating everyone who had anything. As a result, they started implementing Marxism. He called himself a Marxist-Leninist. Now, what happened is, with Marxism, and let me tell you, the biggest lie in the world is this lie about everybody's equal in the communism. That's a lie. On the communism, there are three very distinct classes. There is the party, and the people in the party, they live like millionaires. They control all the wealth, and they control all the power. And then there's the army. They are the enforcers. And then there is the people. And I will grant you there is equality among the people. They all equally starve. Before Castro, Cuba was a very wealthy country, had one of the strongest economies in the world. Number 8 in the world in per capita income. Highest per capita income in all of Latin America. 1-to-1 exchange with the US dollar. Today, under communism, the average salary in Cuba is $14 a month. $14 a month. So, I was disillusioned. I came back from Cuba, never to return again. And then 1976 came about. And I was shocked again when I saw a government started implementing socialist policies in this country, which perhaps the majority of the Americans did not recognize. But having seen socialism at work, I very clearly recognized the socialist policies of Jimmy Carter. Some of you remember the Jimmy Carter era. 18% inflation, 22% interest rates, lines around the block, for gasoline, a government so weakened in its foreign policy that Iran became emboldened and captured a whole bunch of Americans and kept them hostage for 444 days. It is not a coincidence that they were released the day President Reagan was inaugurated. So, as a result of what I saw in Jimmy Carter, I became very involved in an organization called the Religious Roundtable. The Religious Roundtable was a Judeo-Christian organization that mobilized millions of Christians all across the United States and helped elect Ronald Reagan. It was the precursor of the Tea Party even before moral majority. We did it in 1980, we can do it again. So I remember when my son was 8, 9 years old, I was very active in the Ronald Reagan campaign through the Religious Roundtable. So our conversation around the dinner table centered on politics every day. And I don't know how many times I said to my son, you know, Ted, when I lost my freedom in Cuba, I had a place to come to. If we lose our freedoms here, where are we going to go? You know something? There is no place to go. Now, unfortunately, I hear way too often people say, oh, this could never happen in America. It is happening in America. It is happening in America, and our rights are being eroded more and more and more every day. And I'll tell you, I believe that we as Christians have a responsibility. And especially those of you who are pastors. The Word of God says, to whom much is given, much is required. If you think back, 1963, prayer and Bible reading were taken out of schools, and the church remained silent. As a result, teen pregnancy skyrocketed, promiscuity skyrocketed, vandalism skyrocketed, dropout rates in high school skyrocketed. 1973, Roe v. Wade was passed. The church remained silent. And more than 55 million babies are being massacred through abortion. How long are we going to remain silent? It is high time that pastors stop hiding behind the pulpit. Because we're going to have to be accountable to God. You know, just again, look at history. If you look at the beginning of this country, when the Pilgrims came to this country, the first year they had a communistic experiment. They decided, okay, we're going to take the land, we're all going to work the land together and share in the fruits of our labor. They almost starved to death. Almost half of them died that first year. But you know something? They were smart enough to recognize that that socialistic experiment did not work. And the second year they said, you know what? Everybody take their own plot of land. You work the land. You provide for your family. And they did flourish. So the free enterprise system started in this country the second year. Now, we haven't learned from that. And you know, our freedoms keep getting eroded. We also have a responsibility to guide our children. I remember when my son was in junior high, I introduced him to a man by the name of Roland Story, who was the president of an organization called the Free Enterprise Institute. So now, my son is in junior high, and he's reading Milton Friedman. He's reading von Mises. He's reading Hayek. He's reading Adam Smith. He's reading Frederick Bastiat. And he's doing speeches on free market economics. And as he enters high school, now he's reading the Federalist Papers, he's reading the anti-Federalist Papers, and he memorizes, along with 4 other kids, the entire U.S. Constitution. And for the next 4 years, they gave approximately 80 speeches around the state of Texas on free market economics and the Constitution. They would go into a Rotary Club meeting, and while the people were having lunch, they would put 5 easels in the front of the room. And while people were eating, those 5 kids would write the entire U.S. Constitution by memory on those easels. And then they would give a half-hour patriotic speech on the Constitution and free market economics. They gave approximately 20 speeches a year for 4 years, 80 speeches in all. And let me tell you, by the time my son came out of high school, he felt passionate about freedom, about the Constitution, about free markets, about limited government. And I'll tell you, we have a responsibility as parents. The Word of God says, train up a child in the way that you go, and when he's old, he will not depart from. God is going to hold us responsible for the way we guide our children. And then, we've heard throughout the day about attacks on religion, attacks on this, attacks on this other. Again, let's look at history. The real champions of our revolution were the pastors. You ever heard of the Black Robe Regiment? The Black Robe Regiment were a series of pastors that wore long black robes. Many of them had the Continental Army uniform underneath the black robe. They would preach on Sunday, take off that robe, and with half the congregation, they would go out and fight for our independence. As a matter of fact, when Paul Revere made his famous ride, calling "The British are coming," Paul Revere was going to the home of a pastor by the name of Jonas Clark. And at the home of that pastor, there were 2 other people, John Hancock and Samuel Adams. That's where Paul Revere was going. One of the most feared individuals by the British Army was Jonas Clark. Because Pastor Jonas Clark, one of those preacher patriots, recruited more people for the Continental Army than almost anybody else. Where are those pastors today? Where are those pastors today? When we see our rights being eroded, and listen, we need to understand the foundations of what is being done. When you hear this attack on religion, it's not really an attack on religion. The fundamental basis is this: socialism requires that government becomes your God. That's why they have to destroy the concept of God. They have to destroy all loyalties except loyalty to the government. That's what is behind homosexual marriage. It's really more about the destruction of the traditional family than about exalting homosexuality, because you need to destroy also loyalty to the family. Well, I'll tell you what. I want to wrap up with the last few words of the Declaration of Independence, where these men said, "Rely upon the protection of divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Let me tell you, our life is under attack. We already saw what is happening with abortion. The same thing is happening at the other end with Obamacare. Obamacare is going to destroy the elderly by denying care, by even perhaps denying treatment on people that are in catastrophic sicknesses. Your treasure, let me tell you, this administration has both their hands in your pocket. They want to take everything you have, and the money you have in your wallet is worth less and less and less every day. So your treasure is going to be evaporated. But let me tell you something. They cannot take your honor. That's all we got. So my time is over, but I want to leave you with this challenge. I want to challenge you to make a commitment together with me that we can say, I pledge my life, I pledge my fortune, I pledge my sacred honor to do everything I humanly can to restore this country to that shining city on a hill. If every one of us makes that commitment, we will take this country back. The book of Proverbs says in Proverbs 29:2, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, people mourn. But it also says in Psalm 30 verse 5, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. If we all come together, we will take this country.